Well, happy Monday. Good to have you here. Still immersed in the glow of the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. Keep in mind, 50 years ago now, it wasn't over. I mean, they were on their way back. Mike Collins, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong on their way back to Earth, splashed down on the 24th. Oh, yeah, that's right. That was the rest of the story. And then it didn't end there. We went back to the moon a few more times. And then, well, by now, most of us who were around then, but including a lot of the astronauts who made the history, are thinking, well, we'll be on to moon and Mars and beyond by now. Well, better late than never. The legendary Buzz Aldrin joins us here on the Mark Larson Show. So, Buzz, what have you been up to? Not much over the weekend, I'm guessing?
Well, it has been a busy couple of weeks. And just like everything else, it's not over yet.
That's right. And I got to tell you, still so many people who were up there at the Reagan Library a week ago Saturday for part of that event that you invited me to be part of, was they're still talking about it. And, of course, all the other events, you've been bouncing around the country. I mean, hey, more power to you. At 89 years young, you got more energy than I think three of the rest of us put together. So keep them flying, literally.
Well, I got to tell you, Mark, you just did a marvelous job moderating that activity up there. I wish we could have had many more guys.
Well,
to the moon.
Well, we had Charlie Duke from Apollo 16, Capcom on 11. Yeah. We had Walt Cunningham. That was getting you the three of you into about an hour and 10 minutes for my segment. That was enough. We could have gone on 3 days, as you know, just with you. So.
I could have kept going at least that much.
No. Well, give us a little glimpse of over the weekend. Of course, you're with President Trump. You're with Vice President Pence. The Vice President comes out and says, hey, here's the announcement. We're go for this next project. We're going to shoot for the moon landing 2024. Of course, Congress is there with their appropriations, and we're not sure what that's going to look like. But talk about this gateway. He says Orion is ready. SLS rocket, not Saturn V's anymore. What do you make of that? I know it's got to be encouraging, but I know it's not something easy to do here at the start of the week.
Well, I tell you, of course, from the very beginning as a fighter pilot, I began to get enthusiastic about the build-up for space activities, the selection of different people for the Mercury program. Heck, I had met John Glenn when he was a captain and I was a second lieutenant. We were in the same fighter wing over in Korea in 1953. So I felt somewhat attached. And then Ed White, a real good friend of mine from West Point, behind me, we were on the track team together. He welcomed me in 1956 over in Germany when I arrived over there for a fighter squadron with F-100s. And he said, you got to get into this great squadron, the Big 2-2. I did, and I had a very high-spirited group. My family joined a little bit later. We were in gunnery training, but then we were diverted to Munich because the Soviet tanks were going into to Budapest. So we went on alert, flying back along the border. But then in 1957, things warmed up a bit even more in the Cold War, and we were put on alert with nuclear weapon under our wing, 5-minute alert to fly low level into East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and toss our nuclear weapon. And then we had a arrow on our maps to go to either Switzerland or to Sweden and bail out in case our base was obliterated. Now, those were the kind of conditions.
Yeah, that was the time. Yeah, that's right.
In the mid-'60s.
Which is why then the race with the Soviets was so huge. People who weren't around during the Cold War don't know what that was like. That's a glimpse of what happened talking to Buzz Aldrin.
They sure don't realize that.
No, they don't. And that's why the historical context is so important. And again, you didn't believe, Buzz, or Neil, or Mike Collins, or any of the others who've been to the moon in the program, that we'd be sitting here 50 years later and now talking about the next phase. So how real is this going to be? with what Pence has laid out here, and you're on that Space Council with him. So what happens next, and how realistic do you think it is?
Well, of course, when I left NASA, there were big plans for the future.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to stay in the Air Force, and I felt a good way would be Commandant of Cadets at the Military Academy. Only trouble is there was another cadet from my class, and his name was Vandenberg, so he got the job. So I became Commandant at the Test Pilot School.
Mm-hmm.
But I was following very closely the activities as the Apollo program began to wind down, and we missed a couple of opportunities to come up with a very good follow-on. But eventually, we did use the Saturn V and put up a couple of Skylab missions,
right.
And then followed that with an Apollo-Soyuz mission in 1975, a joint mission with the Russians, and then we continued to wait until the space shuttle was completed.
And then 135 shuttle missions, and all important, but all low Earth orbit, and not the big thing that you and the Apollo 11 crew, Buzz Aldrin, did back 50 years ago now. So, and I know that politicians get in the way, budgets get in the way. You've been writing and talking very specifically and lecturing on this and thinking about the different plans to get to Mars and to do big things for a long, long time. That certainly resonates. And then sometimes people who have no idea, what this all means go, well, we're going to pull the plug on this budget and throw some money over here with something nobody will remember. It takes commitment, right, to do this. And so you think we're there now? Is this a short or a tight window to get this done?
Well, I certainly hope so. We've been sort of dragging our feet with not too much of a concrete program for the future, and now we're, I think, sort of left with some leftovers of some political carryover decisions, and we're trying to piece back a program, and it's now going to be called Next Giant Leap Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
I added that word to the vice president on our flight back yesterday from Cape Kennedy, where we were reminiscing, or he was, about the past and the present and the future of our space program. And I had a chance to talk a bit more to him and also to Administrator Jim Bridenstine, opening the door for future conversations about our future.
So talk about this gateway, which is kind of, I guess the way to look at it would be kind of like the space station, the ISS up around Earth now, as it's been for years. You build, just for lack of a better, I know it's a lot more complicated than this, but there would be a gateway of sort of this sort of a picture of space station above the lunar surface, and then there would be excursions.
Mark, it sounds like a very logical way of doing things, of having a way station around the Earth and a way station around the moon. For a while, we called them transportation nodes, where you could go from one transportation node and then go to another one and then go to the surface, even have one around Mars. And a space station could be a node, but we found out that a space station at a fixed place in a fixed orbit was not very convenient to come back to from the moon. We learned that in Apollo. And we also learned back then that there might be a good way to refuel some of the fuel on the moon that is derived from the water that's there. And we could use that out in the sun, and maybe we can have a fueling depot and combine it with the transportation node. Well, frankly, I've analyzed this, and I think we're far better off bringing that fuel back to low Earth orbit and departing from there where the velocity is high, and that's the most efficient way to add energy to an orbit, and we do not need a way station or a transportation node. What I have devised which is very simple, very pure.
Well, it's simple for an MIT expert, a genius like you. It's simple, but for us Earthlings, explain what it is.
This is to have a transway orbit rendezvous. That's between low Earth orbit and lunar orbit, where we have a transfer craft that goes back and forth. It joins up with a lander, transfers the crew, the new crew for the old crew. The lander goes back and lands. The transcraft comes back down to Earth orbit. We know its orbit, so we launch a new crew up. They change with the old crew. Then the transfer craft stays in Earth orbit until we send up new rockets that can take it back to the moon. So it's a very simple round trip, very efficient, and we can make use, I believe, of the Orion spacecraft initially and bring it back to the surface of the Earth.
Okay, so can we do this with this SLS rocket, which has more of the solid fuel like we've seen on the shuttle as opposed to liquid fuel that was in the Saturn V? Compare the two. I mean, the Saturn V was hugely powerful, obviously. You know that. You were there, Buzz Aldrin, on Apollo 11, and the subsequent flights. The Saturn worked beautifully, thanks to 400,000-plus people making all that happen. But the SLS, again, beset by some delays and budgets and so forth, a lot of people will say, oh, it's just like the Saturn V. Well, it's really not. I mean, in terms of thrust, is it close? Is it a third, half?
In performance, it's not either.
Oh.
The Saturn V could take our command module, our lunar module, and 3 of us to the moon into lunar orbit. We made a landing. We explored. We lifted off and made a rendezvous. Some people thought that was going to be quite risky, but I knew from my MIT rendezvous studies that we were going to be able to make that very easily. Now, the SLS cannot even get Orion into lunar orbit with any sufficient maneuvering capability. Now, that's 50 years later.
Well, but see, this is presented, but the average person, but Buzz Aldrin, the average person who hears some of this coverage over the weekend will say, okay, that's all we need to do, and we just need to get the budget. So there's a lot of work to be done on that yet with some things we don't know. I know they're working on them, but does that mean 2024 to the moon, to the lunar surface is iffy or not?
I think it's doable.
Okay.
But I believe we're going to need 2 launches for the payload and 1 upper stage, another launch for 2 upper stages, join them together in Earth orbit, take the transfer craft to the moon, exchange the crew, then bring the transfer craft back in its path for Orion so that it can re-enter and land on Earth eventually, so we can aero capture the transfer craft and reuse it in Earth orbit.
Well, there's so much to see and do and watch, and again, not be passive about this as Americans. You got to lobby the elected officials to keep doing this, and we benefit from so much from the space program. All these people who say, "Oh, it didn't give us anything on Earth," and you go back to 400,000 plus jobs, the technological advances, things we take for granted, but to get moving forward. And this, again, creates new jobs of the future. It's already doing that. It's going to take political will, right?
I can only reinforce that statement tremendously when I see the divisions in our country where one party says we're going to do this and the other party says no. I fully expect the other party to object and say, no, we're not going anywhere in space. You're not going to get any funding at all. Now, that would be a tremendous blow for not only the progress of this nation, for the prestige, for the inspiration of our young people to have petty politics, selfish, self-serving, serving some individuals at the expense of the nation. We came in peace for all mankind. And that means all mankind, all races, colors, religious, spiritual backgrounds. And we did that in peace.
Amen to that. And let's remember, too, the rest of the world doesn't stand still. If we do that, and heaven forbid it gets into that sort of partisan, bickering, stupid bog down, now, when we're on the cusp of doing big things, when people are excited, the 50th anniversary, what it means, where we go, China, some of the other actors out there, they're busy doing what they're doing. I mean, they're not going to stop for us and pause. So that's going on, too. That's
now, at the same time, Mark, being inspired by my father's service and other people's service, I went to West Point, and I know the truth that in peace through strength, we cannot be weak. The meek may inherit the earth, but not the weak.
Amen and amen to that. Buzz Aldrin, you know how much I appreciate you and I love you and just hope you have many, 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 many more years. I love the fact that you have such a great platform now. You had this before the anniversary events. You're certainly right in the middle of it. You're on the National Space Council, which I'll remind listeners that just a little fun fact here. Clinton disbanded in 93. Whether you feel positive about Trump or not, he got it back going in 2017. It's a good thing for America. And, yeah, came in peace for all mankind. That's the whole point as we move forward. Buzz, you're an inspiration, and I'll plug your books later because people ought to read them. They're well worth reading. Try to take a nap for 10 minutes before you get on this next grueling schedule because I look at your schedule and I'm winded. So hang in there, buddy.
I'm going to JPL to talk to a small group of Moon Mars people this evening, so I'm keeping it going. All
right. Expect a full report. See you later. Thanks, Buzz.
Yeah, and then I'll be at the Nixon Library the next night.
Yeah, because he was president. Not that he really did anything to make that happen on Apollo 11, but everybody remembers that call and his contingencies if it didn't go well, but it did, thank God. And we're so glad you're here with us. Buzz, again, honoring you and Neil Armstrong and Mike Collins. Mike out there making the rounds, I know, with you this weekend as well. Talk soon, Buzz. Stay safe. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Buzz Aldrin. I mean, what else do you say? Colonel Aldrin. Lunar module pilot. Dr. Rendezvous. He's written some great books, by the way. Return to Earth. It was pretty honest about some of the struggles he had. Magnificent Desolation is what he called the lunar surface when he stepped out with Neil. He had some challenges over the years after leaving NASA. Been open about that. Presidential Medal of Freedom, which he wears a lot. He's something else. He really is.